Every woman has had a glow up era in her head that never quite materialized in her life. She had the vision, the new routine, the gym membership, the skincare, the Pinterest board, and then 6 months later, she was still the same woman, just with better moisturizer and a Pilates class she attended twice. A glow up is not a routine, it is not a haircut or a wardrobe overhaul. Those things are fine, but they sit on the surface. The women who actually glow up permanently in a way that changes their life and not just their aesthetic are the ones who change something underneath first. You can completely overhaul your external world and walk into it as exactly the same woman you were before. Same patterns, same choices, same ceiling. Just with better skin and a gym membership you feel guilty about not using. The glow up that lasts is an internal one. It is a before and after identity, not a before and after photo. And today we are going through the 5 internal shifts that actually produce it. Most women approach a glow up backwards. They change the outside first and wait for the inside to follow. It almost never works that way. The internal shift has to come first because the way you think about yourself determines every choice you make, including whether you show up for the new routine on day 12 when the inspiration has worn off and nothing has changed yet. The specific shift required is this: moving from a fixed idea of who you are to a genuine belief that you are in a process of becoming. A fixed mindset says, this is just how I am. I have always been like this in relationships. I have never been disciplined. I am not the type of person who does that. It takes your history and presents it as a permanent truth about your nature, which then becomes the justification for every pattern that follows. A growth mindset says, this is where I am right now. It is not where I am staying. That shift is deceptively simple and profoundly difficult because it requires you to stop using your past as evidence of your ceiling. It requires you to make choices from an identity you have not yet earned, based on a vision of yourself that does not yet exist, with no guarantee that it will. That is uncomfortable, but it is also the only way. For example, Mara had spent 3 years telling herself she was just someone who attracted emotionally unavailable men. She had been through enough of them to have built a whole story around it. Patterns from her childhood, her father's absence, the way she had learned to perform low maintenance to be liked. She understood the psychology. She could explain it perfectly to anyone who asked. And she kept choosing the same men. Understanding a pattern is not the same as deciding to break it. The mindset shift happened the day Mara stopped explaining her pattern as something that happened to her and started treating it as something she was actively participating in. That shift did not fix everything overnight, but it made her responsible for what came next in a way that the old story never did. And responsibility, uncomfortable as it is the beginning of actual change. The glow up fantasy is always about the inspired version of yourself. The woman who wakes up at 6, moves her body, eats well, does the work, and goes to bed fulfilled. What the fantasy never includes is the Tuesday in week 3 when you are tired. Nothing has visibly changed yet, and the couch is significantly more appealing than anything on your list. That Tuesday is where the glow up is actually won or lost. Not in the inspired moments, in the ordinary, unglamorous, completely uncinematic moments where you choose the new version of yourself when staying the same would be so much easier. Discipline is not motivation. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings come and go. Discipline is a decision that does not require a feeling to be executed. It is the commitment you honor when you do not feel like it, when nobody is watching, when there is no immediate reward for following through. It is not about being hard on yourself. It is about being consistent with yourself, about proving to yourself in small repeated moments that you can be trusted to do what you said you would do. Most women underestimate how much of their self-concept is built on that trust. A woman who consistently breaks her own promises to herself, even small ones, starts to stop believing herself when she makes new ones. The glow up requires rebuilding that trust, one kept commitment at a time. Take Mara, for instance. She had been starting and stopping things her whole adult life. New routine, 2 weeks, back to nothing. New habit, inspired for a month, abandoned when life got complicated. She had done it so many times that she had stopped fully believing herself when she started something new. Some part of her was already waiting for herself to quit. The shift was not dramatic. She picked one thing and she did not stop doing it. She had decided this was the time she was going to prove to herself that she could be trusted. 3 months later, she had not changed the world, but she had changed her relationship with herself, and that changed everything else. You cannot glow up and keep the same standards. They are incompatible. A woman who is genuinely becoming someone different cannot maintain relationships, environments, and patterns that were built around who she used to be. At some point, the gap between who she is becoming and what she is accepting becomes too wide to hold without something giving way. When you raise your standards, not everything around you rises to meet them. Some things fall away, and that loss can feel like failure. Like the glow up is costing you more than it is giving you, especially in the early stages when what you have lost is visible and what you have gained is not. A standard is not what you claim to require. It is what you actually accept when you are lonely, when you are tired, when holding the line costs you something real. If the standard bends every time it is tested, it is not a standard. It is a preference you negotiate away when it becomes inconvenient. And a glow up built on negotiable standards will not survive the first serious test. The standard has to be structural, built into how you actually live rather than what you say when things are going well. The women who sustain a glow up are the ones whose standards operate automatically, not as rules they consciously enforce, but as non negotiables that have become so embedded in who they are that violating them feels impossible rather than difficult. For example, Mara's standard for a long time was simply that someone had to not actively hurt her. That was the bar. And because the bar was that low, she spent years in friendships that were draining, a relationship that was mediocre at best, and a version of her professional life that was well below what she was capable of. Because none of it technically hurt her. It was just quietly making her smaller. When she raised the standard from does not hurt me to actively adds to my life, 3 friendships and a situationship ended within 2 months. Because when she stopped accepting what those dynamics were offering, the dynamics had nothing left to run on. The space that opened up was uncomfortable. And then it was not. What arrived into it was built on a completely different foundation, a solid one. There is a difference between a woman who is trying to behave like someone different and a woman who has actually become someone different. The first is performance. The second is identity. Performance is exhausting because it requires constant conscious effort. Identity is automatic because the decision has already been made at a level deeper than the moment of temptation. Identity change is the point in the glow up where the external changes start to become self-sustaining rather than requiring constant maintenance. It is when the new choices stop feeling like choices and start feeling like simply who you are. And it is the stage most women never reach because it requires something counterintuitive. You have to decide who you are becoming before you have any evidence that you are becoming her. You have to act from the new identity while the old one is still louder. You have to make the choice the new woman would make, not because it feels natural yet, but because you have decided that is who you are. Over and over until the repetition rewrites the default. The question that makes this practical is not what should I do in this situation? It is what would the woman I am becoming do? And then doing that, even when every familiar instinct is pulling in the opposite direction. Take Mara, for instance. 6 months into her glow up, she received a message from a man she had spent 2 years trying to get over. He had not changed. He was reaching out for the same reasons he always had. Because he was bored, because someone else had not worked out, because Mara had always been available when he needed her to be. The message was warm and familiar and landed in exactly the place in her it was designed to land. Old Mara would have spent the next 3 hours deciding how to reply, cycling through every version of herself he had ever responded well to, crafting something that struck the right balance between available and not too available. New Mara did not reply, because the decision had already been made months before that message arrived, when she chose who she was. The message landed and passed through her without finding a place to stick. That is identity change. That is when the glow up has genuinely taken hold. The final evidence that a glow up is real is not how a woman looks. It is how she behaves. Specifically, the gap between what she now accepts and what she used to tolerate. The glow up is not complete until the internal shifts produce visible, consistent changes in how a woman actually moves through her daily life. Behavior change is what separates women who have done the internal work from women who have consumed content about doing it. You can have the mindset shift and still behave the same way in the moments that matter. You can know your worth intellectually and still accept less in practice. The glow up is not real until the knowledge and the daily behavior are aligned. It shows up in specific, quiet ways. She stops over explaining herself to people who have not earned the explanation. She stops performing happiness she does not feel in situations she should have already left. She asks for what she needs rather than waiting and hoping someone notices. She makes decisions faster because she is no longer negotiating with herself about what she deserves. She leaves rooms that do not serve her without manufacturing a reason dramatic enough to justify the exit. These changes are not cinematic. They do not make a good reel, but they compound. Each small behavioral shift reinforces the identity underneath it, which makes the next shift easier, which reinforces the identity further, until the new way of operating is simply how she lives. For example, a year after she started, people who had known Mara for years struggled to articulate what had changed about her. She looked good, but that was not it. There was something about the way she moved through a room, the way she spoke without qualifying everything she said, the things she used to put up with that she simply no longer engaged with, the version of herself she used to perform for other people's comfort that had quietly stopped showing up. One of her oldest friends eventually said, "You seem like you actually believe in yourself now," an observation she could not fully explain. That is the glow up, the thing that other people notice before they can name it, the shift that happens underneath everything visible and eventually changes everything visible as a result. 5 things. A mindset that stops treating your history as your destiny. A discipline that does not need inspiration to show up. Standards that cost you something when you hold them and cost you more when you do not. An identity you step into before you feel like you have earned it. And behavior that eventually becomes so natural, it stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like simply who you are. That is the glow up that does not require a new season to maintain itself, because it is not built on a season. It is built on a decision, on the accumulation of small, unglamorous, mostly unwitnessed choices that eventually produce a woman who is genuinely different from the one who started. I'll see you in the next one.